Welcome to Paranormal Pages. Please drop a like or comment if you want to help the channel. Now let's get into the true scary stories. The song from below. The old house creaked as the wind swept against its walls, a constant groan that filled the empty rooms with an unsettling noise. I had lived here alone for years now, ever since my parents passed away. The solitude was once a comfort, but lately, it had become suffocating. Tonight, though, something else had settled in the air, something darker, something wrong. I was sitting by the fireplace, trying to lose myself in the pages of a worn-out book, when I first heard it. Faint at first, barely a whisper, but unmistakable. A melody. It seemed to drift from beneath the floorboards, like a lullaby played by invisible hands. My blood ran cold, and I put the book down, straining to listen. The tune was old, familiar in a way I couldn't explain. Then the words followed, slow and warped, like a forgotten memory dragging itself back into the light. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. It was a nursery rhyme. But it wasn't right. I hadn't heard this version before. My heart quickened as the song grew louder, and more sinister. And then it stopped, abruptly, leaving only the echo of the last word. My name. I stood up so fast that the chair behind me toppled over. The rhyme, it had said my name. I couldn't breathe. It felt like icy fingers were wrapping around my throat. Was I imagining it? No. It was real, too real. The sound had come from the basement. I hadn't been down there in God, I couldn't remember the last time I went down there. My hands were trembling, and every instinct screamed at me to stay away, but something about that rhyme called to me. It wanted me to listen. Who's there? I called out, my voice shaking. Silence. But deep down, I knew there would be no answer. No human voice could match the eerie cadence of that song. I grabbed a flashlight from the shelf, my hand barely able to hold steady. The beam cut through the gloom of the hallway as I moved towards the door that led to the basement. As I reached for the rusted doorknob, my heart pounded in my chest. It was colder here, and the door itself seemed to pulse, as though something on the other side was breathing in sync with me. And then, just as my fingers brushed the handle, the song began again. This time, the words were clearer, more deliberate. Hush, little baby, don't you cry. My pulse quickened. The last word echoed softly, lingering like the hiss of a dying flame, you. My breath came out in sharp, shallow gasps as the rhyme echoed in my ears. The words twisted in the air like smoke, growing heavier with each repetition. Hush, little baby, don't you cry. It felt like the house itself was whispering, urging me to go down into the dark. I forced the door open, wincing as the rusted hinges screeched like a scream. The staircase leading down into the basement was a gaping mouth, swallowing the light from my flashlight as I shone it into the void. I hesitated for a moment, standing at the threshold, feeling the cold draft curl around my ankles like a warning. Don't go down there, some small part of me pleaded. But I was already moving, my feet carrying me down the stairs with a mind of their own. With each creak of the old wooden steps, the nursery rhyme grew louder, more insistent. Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird, I remembered that line. My mother used to hum it to me when I was little, rocking me to sleep. But the voice singing it now was wrong, twisted, as though the melody had been warped by something inhuman. Halfway down, the beam of my flashlight flickered, casting the basement in quick flashes of shadow and light. My skin prickled with the sensation of being watched. I stopped, gripping the railing for support as the cold gnawed at my bones. I could almost feel something waiting at the bottom, lurking just out of sight. The air down here was thick, heavy with the scent of mildew and something else, something sour and metallic. Blood, maybe. I tried to steady my breathing as I continued down the last few steps. The light finally stabilized, revealing the basement in full. Boxes and old furniture were scattered across the room, covered in thick layers of dust. But in the far corner, something stood out. A large, old chest, its wooden surface cracked and warped. I had no memory of that chest. It looked ancient, far older than anything I remembered being down here. As I moved closer, the singing stopped abruptly. The silence was deafening, pressing in on me from all sides. My hand hovered over the latch, the air around me growing colder by the second. And then, From somewhere deep inside the walls, the rhyme began again. If that mockingbird won't sing. This time, it was more than a whisper. It was a growl, a voice dripping with malice. My name followed once again, like a final taunt, wrapping itself around my thoughts like a vice. I jerked my hand back, my heart hammering in my chest. Something inside the chest was moving. I could hear a faint scratching, like nails dragging across wood. The sound sent chills racing down my spine. My mind raced, should I open it? Run? But before I could decide, a loud thud shook the floor beneath me, coming from the chest. My breath hitched. I took a step back, the flashlight shaking in my grip as the scratching grew louder, more frantic. And then, in a moment of stillness, I heard it, faint, but unmistakable. A child's voice, calling from inside the chest. "Let me out," it whispered, its voice frail and pleading. "Please. Let me out." I froze, unable to process what I just heard. A child's voice. Inside the chest. It couldn't be real. The rational part of my brain screamed that it was impossible, that I was hearing things, but the voice was so clear, so desperate. The scratching stopped as soon as I took another step toward the chest. Silence stretched across the basement like a taut wire, broken only by my ragged breathing. "Please," the voice came again, softer this time. "I'm scared." My pulse hammered in my ears. How long had it been since I had gone down to the basement? Days? Weeks? It was a blur. But somehow, this chest had always been here, lurking in the shadows of my memories. I leaned down, my fingers brushing against the cold, dust-covered wood. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around, to run, but I couldn't. Something was drawing me to it, like an invisible hand pulling me closer. "I'm here," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Who are you?" The voice hesitated, as if confused by my question. I'm you," it finally said, the words slithering out of the darkness. The floor beneath my feet felt like it shifted, as though reality itself bent around those words. The chill in the room deepened, gnawing at my bones. I stepped back, shaking my head. "No, that's not possible. This isn't right. You can't be me." The chest shuddered violently, the sound of something, or someone, inside slamming against the lid. My hands flew to my ears, trying to block out the horrible thudding noise, but it seemed to vibrate through the very walls. And then, with a deafening crack, the chest flew open. At first, I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. There was no child. No fragile, lost voice. Instead, something far worse emerged. A figure, twisted and gnarled, its limbs too long, its face a grotesque mockery of my own. Eyes like empty voids stared at me from a face that was a decayed version of myself, skin hanging loose from its frame as though it had been rotting for centuries. The thing opened its mouth, its lips parting with an awful, wet sound. "I told you. I'm you," it whispered, its voice a warped echo of mine. "And I've been waiting." My flashlight flickered wildly, casting distorted shadows around the room. The creature dragged itself out of the chest, its joints cracking with every unnatural movement. I stumbled backward, tripping over an old chair, my legs giving out beneath me as I fell to the ground. The thing loomed over me, its breath cold and rancid, filling the air with the stench of decay. "Why did you leave me here?" It rasped, tilting its head in a way that no human could. "Why did you forget?" I tried to speak, to defend myself, but the words caught in my throat. Memories I had buried long ago began to surface, moments of fear, of loneliness, from when I was a child. Nights when I had heard strange noises from the basement and refused to go down, telling myself it was just the house settling. But deep down, I had always known. Something had been here, waiting for me to remember. The creature reached out, its hand a rotting reflection of my own, and I felt my body go cold as its fingers brushed my skin. "You can't escape me," it whispered. "I am you." And then, just as I thought the icy grip would pull me into the darkness forever, a loud crash came from upstairs. The front door slammed open, the sound reverberating through the house. The creature's head snapped toward the sound of the door, its eyes widening as the thudding echo filled the house. The tension in the air crackled like electricity, and for a brief moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Someone, or something, was up there. I wasn't alone anymore. But that hope died quickly when the creature turned its gaze back to me. "They can't help you," it hissed, the twisted version of my face contorting with an eerie grin. Its voice was full of malice, dripping with hunger. "No one can." I scrambled to my feet, my legs shaky, and bolted up the stairs before it could react. My mind was a whirlwind of panic, the rhythm of my footsteps pounding in time with my heartbeat. I didn't look back, but I could hear it behind me, slow, deliberate steps, following. The rhyme returned in its sickening voice, echoing in my ears. "If that mockingbird won't sing, Papa's gonna buy you a diamond ring." I burst through the basement door, slamming it shut behind me. My chest heaved as I tried to catch my breath, leaning against the door. But the momentary relief was cut short when I realized the rhyme was still playing, louder now, resonating through the walls of the house. It was coming from everywhere. "And if that diamond ring turns brass." I ran down the hallway, the floorboards groaning beneath my feet as the house itself seemed to bend and shift. There was a presence, something unseen but heavy, lingering in every shadow. I reached the front door, only to find it wide open, cold wind swirling in from outside. But there was no one there. No sign of help. Just the endless dark outside. A cold dread crept up my spine as I turned around, my heart sinking. The creature was standing at the end of the hallway, just beyond the basement door. It hadn't followed me fully, but it was watching, waiting. Its sunken eyes gleamed in the dim light, and its lips curled into a mocking smile. "Papa's gonna buy you a looking glass." The words rolled out in a deep, distorted version of my voice, filling the space between us. I knew what I had to do. The rhyme always ended with a name. My name. It had been calling me to the basement, and I had answered. But it wasn't finished. The final verse was yet to come. If I didn't stop it now, it would complete the song, and something far worse than this creature would take hold. Desperation coursed through me as I grabbed the fireplace poker from its stand. It felt heavy in my hands, a feeble weapon against something so ancient and otherworldly. But I had no choice. I advanced slowly, heart hammering, the creature's eyes locked on mine. "You don't have to do this," I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince, myself or the thing that stood before me. "You can stay down there. I'll forget. I'll leave you alone." Its smile widened, splitting its rotting face almost in half. "But you didn't forget, did you?" It rasped, stepping forward. "That's why I'm here. You remembered. And now you'll never be free." I swung the poker with all my strength, the metal slicing through the air toward the creature. But before the blow could land, it dissolved into the shadows, disappearing like smoke. The poker hit nothing but air, and I stumbled, nearly falling as the thing reappeared behind me. "Hush, little baby, don't you cry," it whispered, so close to my ear that I felt its breath on my neck. I whirled around, heart racing, but the hallway was empty. I could feel its presence all around me now, wrapping itself around the house like a shroud. The rhyme reached its final verse, slow and deliberate, each word dripping with malevolence. "And if that looking glass gets broke." The walls of the house groaned, shifting as though the whole structure was alive, warping under the weight of something far older and darker than I had ever imagined. "Papa's gonna buy you." The lights flickered one last time, plunging me into total darkness as the final word whispered through the cold, empty air. "Me." The house fell silent. Hey. Subscribe for more true scary stories. Story 2. The Blinking Portrait. It started innocuously enough. I had inherited the painting from my late uncle, a man I barely knew but whose odd collection of artwork had always intrigued me. It was a large, grim piece, an oil portrait of a man dressed in 18th century attire. His face was pale, eyes dark, almost too lifelike for comfort. The eyes in particular held a certain gravity, an unsettling depth, as though they pierced through the canvas and into whoever was unfortunate enough to gaze upon them. The moment I hung the portrait in my living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that the eyes followed me. I laughed it off at first, dismissing it as a trick of light, the mind playing games with an eerie work of art. But every time I passed by, the feeling returned. It was subtle at first, just a sensation crawling at the back of my mind. The man in the portrait seemed to be watching, his eyes shifting, though I never caught them move. One night, as the wind howled outside, I sat alone, staring at the portrait. The silence of my apartment pressed against my ears, amplifying the creaks and groans of the old building. The painting hung above the fireplace, its eyes boring into me from across the room. I squirmed under the gaze. Something about the portrait made the hairs on my arms prickle. I convinced myself I was imagining things, that it was my own tiredness playing tricks on me. But then, it blinked. I jumped, heart pounding, staring at the portrait in disbelief. No, it couldn't have. Paintings don't blink. I stood, walking closer, inspecting the face in the dim light. Nothing. The eyes were still. Hollow. Unmoving. I let out a breath, shaking my head. I'm losing it, I muttered aloud, convincing myself the isolation was getting to me. Days passed, and yet the feeling lingered. The eyes didn't just follow me anymore, they watched my every move. I grew restless, avoiding the living room, afraid of what I might see. I tried covering it with a cloth, but it didn't help. Even hidden, I felt the eyes boring through the fabric. Every sound in the apartment, every creak of wood or shuffling in the walls, made my skin crawl. And each time I glanced at the painting, I swore those eyes blinked more frequently. Longer now. Slower. It wasn't until I tried to remove the painting that things escalated. One evening, unable to bear the suffocating presence of it any longer, I grabbed the edges of the frame, intending to take it down. But the moment my hands touched it, a cold shock jolted through my fingertips. I recoiled, as though the portrait itself were resisting. My breath caught in my throat as I stared into those dark, menacing eyes. I couldn't look away, no matter how much I tried. I couldn't explain what happened next. My hands trembled as they hovered in front of the painting, unwilling to touch it again. The cold sensation that had rushed through my fingers still lingered, as if the portrait had drawn something from me, a piece of my very being. The man's eyes glistened with malice, their darkness unfathomable. I backed away slowly, feeling my heart race, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside the room had shifted, something beyond the painting itself. I tried to avoid the living room altogether after that night. But even in other parts of the apartment, I could sense its presence. It was as if the painting's gaze extended beyond its frame, reaching for me no matter where I went. Sleep became impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the window, sent me spiraling into dread. I would close my eyes at night only to open them moments later, certain that those dark eyes were waiting for me in the shadows. One evening, I decided to call someone, anyone. I needed to talk to somebody who could help me make sense of what was happening. I reached out to Eliza, an old friend who knew a thing or two about antiques. When I explained the situation to her, she didn't laugh as I expected. Instead, she grew quiet. "You need to get rid of that painting," she finally said, her voice strained. "I've heard of pieces like that before. They're not just objects, they're vessels." Vessels? I echoed, my stomach nodding. The word felt heavy, oppressive. It's hard to explain, but there are certain artifacts, artwork, statues, that are more than they seem. They can act as conduits for things from the other side. Eliza paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "You need to destroy it, but be careful. If it's a strong enough vessel, it won't let go easily." Her words rattled me more than I cared to admit. After we hung up, I stared at the painting from the doorway of the living room, afraid to step closer. The idea of destroying it felt absurd, yet something deep inside me knew she was right. The man's eyes seemed to flicker, almost as if in warning, daring me to make a move. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen, my palms sweaty as I clutched the handle. I didn't have a sledgehammer or anything heavy enough to shatter the canvas, but I figured slashing it to pieces would do the trick. As I stepped closer to the painting, the temperature in the room dropped. My breath came out in shallow, visible puffs, and I could feel a pressure building in the air, like something waiting to strike. With one swift motion, I slashed at the canvas. But the blade stopped mid-swing, caught in the air as though an invisible force had seized it. I struggled to move, my arms locked in place, my breath hitching in my throat. And then, to my horror, the man in the painting blinked again, this time slowly, deliberately. His lips curled into the faintest of smiles. "I told you," Eliza's words echoed in my mind. "It won't let go easily. My knife fell to the ground with a clatter, and I stumbled back, panic surging through me. The air seemed to thicken, making it hard to breathe. I had no idea how to destroy the painting, and now it was too late to stop whatever was happening. The room grew darker, shadows creeping along the walls. And I knew, with a sinking feeling, that I was no longer alone. I stumbled out of the living room, my heart pounding as I slammed the door behind me. The shadows that had begun creeping from the painting seemed alive, sentient, as if they were reaching for me. My hands shook uncontrollably, and I could still feel the weight of that sinister smile, carved into the face of the man in the portrait. His gaze felt embedded in my skin, like needles pressing into my soul. Eliza. Eliza will know what to do, I muttered to myself, frantically searching for my phone. But as I pressed the call button, a wave of static filled the line. I could barely make out her voice between the crackling noise. Eliza? I shouted, desperate for her to respond. The static cleared for just a moment. Get out of the house, now. She yelled. But before I could reply, the line went dead. My heart dropped into my stomach. The realization hit me like a freight train. I was trapped here, alone, with that thing. The apartment was eerily quiet. No wind, no distant hum of traffic. Just a suffocating stillness. I tried to think rationally, but my mind was spinning. Could I leave? Would the painting let me? I had to try. Grabbing my coat, I rushed to the front door, but as my hand gripped the knob, something stopped me cold. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement, faint, but unmistakable. Turning slowly, I looked down the hallway toward the living room. The door I had closed was now ajar, and beyond it, I could just make out the edges of the portrait, the man's eyes watching me through the sliver of space. My breath hitched as the door opened wider, seemingly by itself. Then, as if daring me to step closer, the shadows began to swirl from the frame, pouring out like black smoke, curling around the edges of the room. The shadows moved with purpose, not randomly. They stretched across the floor, crawling up the walls, reaching toward me like dark fingers. I stumbled back, unable to tear my eyes away. They were coming for me, and I was powerless to stop them. Suddenly, the temperature in the hallway plummeted. I could feel the air grow dense, pressing down on my lungs. My breath came out in short, sharp gasps. And then, from deep within the apartment, I heard it, a whisper, soft at first but growing louder. Look at me, it said. The voice was cold, inhuman, and it sent shivers down my spine. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The shadows reached me, brushing against my feet, coiling around my ankles. Look at me, the voice repeated, louder this time, demanding. I clamped my hands over my ears, squeezing my eyes shut, refusing to give in. But I could feel the pull, like an invisible hand tugging at my mind. Something was trying to force me to look at the portrait. The harder I fought, the stronger the pull became. In a moment of sheer terror, I opened my eyes just a crack, and there it was, the man in the painting. He wasn't just staring anymore. He was emerging. His body pressed against the canvas as though he were trying to push his way through, his pale hands stretching the fabric like skin over bone. His eyes, those dark, unholy eyes, fixed on mine, and this time, I couldn't look away. I'm not just a painting, the voice whispered again, but this time it came from behind me. I spun around in terror, and the last thing I saw before everything went black was the man's cold hand reaching toward my face. When I awoke, the world was wrong. I blinked, trying to focus, but my vision was clouded, dim. The walls of my apartment seemed warped, twisted as though I was looking through a layer of thick glass. The familiar smell of old wood and dust clung to the air, but there was something else, something dark, like the scent of decay lurking just beneath the surface. I tried to move, but my body felt heavy, anchored by an unseen force. Panic surged through me as I realized I wasn't lying on the floor of my apartment. I was standing, no, I was frozen, upright. My arms stiffened at my sides, my legs locked in place. It was as if I had become a statue, a part of the very walls around me. I struggled to shift, but my movements were slow, sluggish, like pushing against an invisible weight. Then, I heard the footsteps. They were faint at first, soft as though coming from somewhere far away, but steadily, they grew louder, closer. The sound sent a wave of dread through my chest, and I tried to call out, to scream for help, but my mouth wouldn't open. I was trapped, silenced, unable to make a sound. The footsteps stopped just out of view, and then I saw him. The man from the painting. He wasn't just a figure trapped within the canvas anymore. He walked freely, his pale face illuminated by the dim light in the room, and his eyes, those cursed, blinking eyes, were fixed directly on me. I could feel his gaze, cold and piercing, as if he could see into the very core of me. He moved with eerie grace, his body swaying slightly as he stepped closer. "You shouldn't have looked," he whispered, his voice dripping with malice. "Once you look, you can never leave." I struggled harder, trying to move, to break free of whatever force held me. My fingers twitched slightly, but it wasn't enough. The man's face contorted into a cruel smile as he raised his hand, the same cold hand I had seen reaching for me before everything went black. He stepped even closer, and I could feel the chill emanating from him, the unnatural cold that seemed to seep into my very bones. With a slow, deliberate motion, he reached out and touched my face. The moment his fingers grazed my skin, a wave of nausea and fear overwhelmed me. I wanted to scream, to tear myself away from him, but I couldn't. His eyes bored into mine, unblinking now, as though he was pulling something from me, something vital. My vision darkened again, and in the growing blackness, I realized the awful truth. I wasn't just trapped in my apartment. I was inside the painting. As the realization hit, I felt the last of my strength ebb away. The world around me was now nothing more than shadows and smudged colors, a twisted, nightmarish version of the life I had once known. The man's voice echoed in my ears, cold and final. "Now, it's your turn to watch." And as the darkness swallowed me whole, I saw it, the living room, my apartment, just as it had been before. But now, I was the one staring out from the canvas. My eyes, once mine, blinked, slowly, deliberately. And I knew someone else would come. They would see the portrait, feel the pull, and when they looked too closely, they would join me here, trapped beneath the canvas, cursed to watch forever. The end. Subscribe for more true scary stories. Thanks for watching.